Welcome to the Noah Presgrove case. Today is a viewer requested video giving my thoughts, a bit of a psychological analysis on a supposed event or alibi of what was to happen on the day, Monday, when Noah Presgrove was found. I guess tying in line, I'm thinking later on into the day possibly, it's all to do with the fishing trip. Some of you may have heard about that. It was mentioned directly from the mouth of Jack Newton in one of the text messages, which you may have seen in last night's video when we were going through a couple of them. It was also brought up by the girlfriend CC, also known as Carter Combe. She's mentioned it as well. I'm going to show you the screenshots once again, at least from one point of view, just to, re-jog people's memory about it. But what it's all about and how it ties in with the case, that's what needs to be assessed. And if it did actually happen, or if it was going to happen, why? Considering what's happened about finding out news that your best friend has died in a brutal way, why would you want to go on a fishing trip? What's the mindset behind it? What goes through people's thoughts and feelings? That's what I want to try and look at today. Give you my thoughts, compare it to previous discussions from the past, and it might make it a little bit clearer for you. So for anyone watching, share your thoughts, your reactions, whether it be to what I've said or what's been mentioned recently and in the past about a supposed alibi or some kind of activity that was already going to happen anyway, but may have been called off because of what happened to Noah. How does it quite fit into it all? I'm also aware that people are a little bit skeptical or a bit cautious of the likes of Jack Newton, the best friend of Noah Presgrove, considering Jack may have contradicted himself here and there, and some of the comments he made was a bit questionable, such as claiming to know at what time Noah died. Yeah, it was 5:30 when a stranger came across Noah, but it was reported by Jack at 4 or round about 4, an hour and 30 minutes earlier. That's when he knew, but no report or call was made to the police. You get what I'm saying? It's a little bit odd. Not everything matches up. There's questions with the party goers. Who's hiding what? Are they covering for one another? Are parents involved as well? Bit of a messy situation, I understand. It's no different to the Riley Strain case where the fraternity brothers, who appears if they don't care because they're getting on with activities, having parties the following day. What about mourning for your best friend? Or what about at a point in time searching for them early on? Because in the Riley Strain case, at first it was a missing person case. So take that into consideration. But instead of trying to search, find answers, cooperate with police, too busy having fun, getting on with life. But what about your friend? Does that translate with the Riley Strain case to the Noah Presgrove case with the likes of some of his friends and even his best friend? Well, you can let me know what you think down below. Before we go any further, if you want to share, you want to catch up on recent research by me, including an analysis, an archiving, documenting key messages by the likes of Jack Newton through text on Facebook, a little compilation of them. You're interested in that? And maybe some other videos as well. Top right corner of the screen, click on the eye symbol. You'll be able to catch up on the video from last night. And I'm going to try and add the playlist as well. I've created that in the Noah Presgrove playlist, The Gruesome Case of Noah, where I'll put all my videos on the case just so it's easier to find and locate, etc. And yeah, that's about it. Be on the lookout for a video later on tonight at around 8:30 p.m. UK time. We're going to be taking a look at another area, another topic. I believe it will probably be the homeowner situation, another text which has come about. More about that later. Be on the lookout for it. A range of stuff to cover and look at. Right now, a viewer requested video on the supposed event alibi of what was supposedly going to happen, a fishing trip, shortly after hearing of the news of Noah Presgrove. Was it called off? Not quite sure. Did they follow through with it? I don't know. But we're going to work around it on the basis that it did happen or that it was going to happen, regardless, what would be going through the person's mind, especially post-news of hearing about the death of the best friend. I just want to add a little bit more backstory before we go any further, just so you know who we're talking about today and briefly analysing. I'm going to show you one of the screenshots from one of the person's point of view about highlighting the fishing trip, okay? So you see it for yourself. But the key people this involves, this discussion, Jack Newton himself, best friend of Noah Presgrove, Jack Newton's father, known as Caleb Newton, and I believe, based off the status, Jack Newton's girlfriend, known as CC, also known as Carter Combs. Now, it might take me some time to remember these names and initials. I'll try my best not to mess it up as I go along. There are a lot of people out there within the case, the party goers, the abbreviated names, the parents' names, the friends' names. It's a bit all over, but eventually with time it will get easier to remember, etc. So once again, we're focusing on Jack Newton, Caleb Newton, the father of Jack, and Jack's girlfriend, CC, Carter Combe, right? Now, let's just transition on to that text message with the event of the fishing. I believe this is a comment thread from Facebook, like the rest. I'll just zoom in so it's a bit easier for you to see. Carter Combs, right there, known as CC, responding to a person called Shannon Scott. I was supposed to go with my boyfriend, Jack Newton, on the fishing trip, and I was already awake when he woke up because we had just got in from looking for Noah. I hope this answers that question. So, the way it's worded here at least, this seems to be in the middle of it all. So after 3:30 a.m. Monday morning, when Noah left the party, no one could find him, seen as missing. One of the girls, don't know if it was Carter Combs or another girl, ended up posting some kind of Snapchat or screenshot online on Facebook maybe to say Noah is missing, but they were smiling in the photo. I guess at the time they weren't aware supposedly of the death of Noah. Then fast forward later, that's when they found out. So if that's the correct order, maybe the fishing trip never did actually happen, but that's what the plan was on a Monday or a Tuesday, well, on a Monday later on. But upon hearing the news of Noah, it was called off. So that seems to be the order there. There might be other conversations elsewhere previously where it might have been worded as they've heard about the news of Noah's death, but they still plan on doing that fishing trip. If it's worded like that, and that's what people are led to believe, I wouldn't say it matches up with what Carter Combs says here. It seems like the plan was already in place, but because of trying to look for Noah, things were either delayed or called off the fishing expedition. Because as it says here, I was supposed to go with Jack Newton on a fishing trip, and I was already awake, and we just got back from searching for Noah. So I was supposed to means I didn't in the end. So that rules Carter Combs out then, but what about Jack Newton and his father Caleb? Did they still go on the fishing trip? I wonder. Makes you think. Lower down. Tiffany, I don't comment a lot, but I'm confused. Now, Carter Combs was supposedly going on the guy's fishing trip. How many fishing trips were planned? That sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? I don't know what that's on about, but all I've heard, and I heard it from Jack Newton as well, because we saw those text messages recently, that he was supposed to be going on a fishing trip with his father and grandpa. You remember that? We saw that last night. Did it truly happen? Not quite sure. The waters were a little bit murky there, no pun intended. But if we're basing it off it happened anyway, or the plan was they were still going to attempt to go on the fishing trip after hearing of the news of Noah, why would anyone do that? during a sad event. I'll be honest with you, there's a range of thoughts going through my mind, maybe some for and against, suspicious and natural. What's the psychology behind it all? I'm going to explain it right now as best as I can. I'm going to word it in like a scenario setting that it did happen, or that they were still planning on doing it despite hearing the news of their best friend dying. Why would you still want to do a fun activity when you could be spending that time mourning, or I don't know, caring for other friends who may be upset, whatever you would do, because not everybody is in the mood to just move on with life immediately like that after the death of someone. Now, granted, there's a range of humans out there in this world that will react differently to different stuff. Sometimes when there's sad news or a serious bad event, a person may laugh because of a nervous laughter. It can happen, and it can be misinterpreted as disrespectful, not taking it seriously, but it's just how that person copes in that situation. How does Jack Newton cope, though, upon hearing about the death of the friend? Well, I still think that maybe the fishing trip was probably planned before that, before the party maybe, or during the party. And then what happened afterwards, kind of unknown. But let's say you're in a situation, you hear about the death of your best friend. You might be upset, you might be shocked, it might be too much, very overwhelming. And if for whatever reason you just so happen to be at the scene at a certain point and see the lifeless body of your best friend, maybe it can throw you over the edge. It might be too much and you're thinking, I need to get away from this area. So you'll go somewhere, you may even distance yourself from the current event, detach from it. Not because you're a psychopath, but it's a bit too much to deal with in that moment. Take time out, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a day or two, and then return back. Now, in a situation like this where it could have been seen as a murder case, possibly foul play, the uncertainty of it, especially at the time, to be moving away from the area, and if you're a person of interest, I don't know, that could get caught up with the police. It could be seen as a bit suspicious. You might genuinely want to get away from the place, do something as a distraction, but in some circumstances, you're not allowed to leave the area or the radius. Was that the case here? I'm not too sure. But when I think of the Dylan Rounds case, something completely different and unexpected happened there. The actual killer responsible, James Brenner, who was actually on the property near where Dylan Rounds was murdered, because Dylan came onto the property, Brenner was already there, Brenner shot Dylan multiple times. Whilst the investigation was underway at the start and the police were coming on down, it wasn't truly treated as a crime scene, which is shocking, right? But on top of that, Brenner was allowed to come and go from the area, yet he was a person of interest. He had a previous arrest warrant to do with other stuff, which was delayed and dragged out, and he's the killer in that case, unknown to people at the time, or not enough evidence to back that up at the time. And yet, despite being a person of interest and an actual criminal investigation, a homicide case, he was allowed to move about. He was allowed to leave the area. Really? He wasn't even questioned that much. Should have been locked down. No one move. No one go anywhere. We need to ask all the questions. We need to figure out what's happened, right? That was an exception. That was a kind of like a one-off. It didn't make sense. And in the process of all of that, the likes of Brenner was able to go to the grain shed, the crime scene, and bag items up, take them away, and dispose of them. Could have been vital evidence. The police did nothing about it. They just stood there, right? And that could have been items of Dylan, could have been evidence to do with the killing, and they were just taken away by Brenner, went down to West Wendover with his friend Don Hatley, and possibly disposed of him there. And he was allowed to move about freely and openly. Was that the case in the Noah Presgrove case with Jack Newton, such as with this fishing trip, I wonder? Is that like a downfall by the police, not as proactive early on? Maybe there's some patchy areas there. I know there's criticism coming in aimed towards the police. Maybe I'll get to that eventually. But if you're allowed to move about openly and you're not locked down in a place, even if you are a person of interest possibly, well, then yeah, go on a fishing trip. But why? As a form of escapism. Your mind overloaded, too upsetting, too hard to deal with. Shock to your system and mind. What you've just heard, what you may have just witnessed, you need to get away from it. Distance yourself, have time out, have a distraction. It might not be good enough, but anything's better than just staying there or staying roadside where the body is. As I said, everybody reacts differently. Some people may want to comfort the body and stay there for as long as possible. Others don't want anything to do with it because it's too much. So if that was the case with Jack Newton and he was visibly upset, if that was the case, because I did hear reports about at some point Jack came running back to the house and he went into a room, or he stuffed his head into a pillow near his girlfriend, visibly upset. If that really is the case, supposedly, well then shows how much of a toll and impact it's had on him. And with that, maybe, yeah, let's go on a fishing trip with his father, with his grandfather. It's people you know, people you can trust in his situation, a level of comfort and a level of distraction by doing an activity, a peaceful one. But if you do a peaceful activity, doesn't it mean you're sitting down fishing, you got time to think, process everything? Well, yeah, that can kind of link onto the suspicious side. Getting together, talking it through. We'll save that for a bit later. But still, you're doing fishing, you're talking with friends, you're talking with family, in this case with Jack Newton, a fishing trip. It can be peaceful, it can be calm, it can be relaxing, and it might be something that you need, especially after supposedly a traumatic event. So I get that part. As for the girlfriend tagging along, which supposedly didn't happen in the end, if the fishing trip did actually happen with Jack and his father and his grandfather, why was that? Maybe because the girlfriend was too upset or just wanted to stay put with other people to hear about more news, maybe. I said, I'm not personally sure or for definite as to if the fishing trip definitely did happen or if it was going to happen and we're considering it despite hearing the news of Noah. It's a little bit uncertain. I'm just basing it off the scenarios that it did happen and why would someone follow up on that activity after hearing of the devastating news. So one of the factors, what we've already looked at, the psychological reasoning is to detach, to distance oneself, to create a form of escapism for a bit and a distraction so it doesn't impact you too bad. And then once it's done, you return back, reality kicks back in, and then you deal with it then. So that's one possibility, right? As for the father, as for the grandfather, don't know too much about them. Some people have said that the father of Jack Newton, a little bit shady, supposedly caught up in some kind of confusion or misunderstanding with a death of a 6-year-old in the past and an accident with a propeller on a boat and a kid being behind it and dying. That's what I've heard. I don't know if it's a fact. It's just about what's been talked about in the community. That's all I'm saying at this moment, okay? Now, if there are parents which could have a bit of a shady past, I can understand why people would be skeptical of them now, and how they could have a role or influence on one of their sons or daughters if they've been caught up in a similar event, right? One covering for the other, one's got experience, one tells the younger one what to do, how to think, where to go. Is there a possible influence that in this case, in this situation, the fishing trip was arranged or encouraged last minute by the father, grandfather, upon hearing of what's happened to Noah, upon hearing that the best friend and their son, or grandson, Jack Newton, visibly upset by it for whatever reason, and they're thinking, you know what, come with us, get away from it. It might do you good, or maybe we need to have a talk ourselves as to what went on. And that's where we transition on to the psychological part of skepticism, suspicion, right? Directly by the choice of Jack Newton or influences from the father figure, the grandfather, encouraging him to move away. If they were at that fishing trip, what did the father say? What did the grandfather say to Jack? Are you okay? Are you responsible? What actually happened? You need to get your story straight. Some people in the community were saying how Jack Newton's father was actually at the party and supposedly flirting with younger individuals. That's all that's been talked about. I don't know if it's a fact. It's just been mentioned in the background. If it really was the case that the father, Jack Newton, and the son, Caleb, apologies, the father, Caleb Newton, and his son, Jack Newton, were both at the party at some point, for whatever reason, then maybe they do need to get away. Lay low, reduce heat levels, possibly. But then it's one of those things. If you lay low and you move away from a current ongoing case investigation, you could be seen as escaping, which could be considered suspicious, right? It's like when it comes to talking within a case, it's been said that a range of people from the party goes, not all have been cooperative or that talkative. Are they hiding something? Suspicious. But then you got the opposite of someone like Jack Newton, who's kind of vocal, and it's been shared about, the text messages publicly. And whilst you could consider that as a positive, he's been helpful, he's very talkative, revealing things. The more you talk, the more likely you are to make mistakes or inconsistencies, and that's what's happened with Jack Newton, so suspicion has come from there. It's a lose-lose situation. You keep quiet, you could be seen as being suspicious, hiding something, responsible. If you talk too much and appear too helpful, but make mistakes and contradictions along the way, you could be considered as being unreliable, suspicious, hiding something, the lot. The same can happen in terms of where you physically are within a case and investigation. Are you nearby, too close nearby, or too distant, far away, like you're fleeing, you're escaping? If you're too far away and it happens too soon, could that be seen as you're responsible and you're trying to get away from the police presence? But if it's that noticeable, you will be seen as suspicious. If you're too close, though, to the case and the proximity, you hang around too much, you could be seen as you want answers and you care, but maybe you're listening into every word just to make sure there's no slip-ups, to make sure no one's on to you, right? When it came to the Dylan Rounds case, the killer's best friend, Don Hatley, ended up moving away from the area of Lucin, the place where Dylan Rounds was murdered. Did it happen immediately? Not quite, but a bit later on, when the case was still ongoing and answers weren't brought about and no justice either, that's when Don moved away. It was a little bit suspicious because it was actually at the time when Dylan Rounds' father, Justin Rounds, was calling Don out and saying, "Where are you? Come back. Meet me at the main line. We need to talk it out." Dead men walking. All kinds of call-outs by the father, Justin. Was Don running away because he knew something? Or he was scared of Justin Rounds? Who knows, but it was seen as a bit suspicious, the timing of it and the responses from the family. So does that apply here in some kind of similar form with Noah Presgrove's case and Jack Newton? Maybe. To refer back to the fishing trip, if it did happen, and, being pulled aside, moving away, going to that fishing trip, was it a time to reflect on what's happened, to get their stories straight, to make sure they're all in line, to maybe get advice from his father, Jack's father, Caleb, for Caleb to tell his son, Jack, what to do, what not to do. Keep quiet, stay close, stay distant. Maybe some tips were given of what you should do. I think maybe we've seen some discussions recently online where people were saying it's as if the friends of Noah and distant are keeping quiet, maybe because of influences from the parents as well. The parents possibly telling their sons, their daughters to keep quiet. They're all in on it together. Suspicion, skepticism there only. Similar to the Riley Strain case, because when the fraternity brothers weren't that helpful and they didn't seem to care too much, Riley Strain's parents, family, were considering maybe those fraternity brothers, the friends of Riley Strain, but the parents of him were assisting in keeping quiet, like some kind of direct influence or authority. Makes you think, right? And that would be seen as a bit odd. When it came to the Dylan Rounds case, the likes of Dylan Rounds' brother Colton Rounds, the likes of Dylan Rounds' best friend JD, were pretty quiet within the case. They weren't vocal online at all. They didn't appear on any interviews or panels or shows or anything like that. Only the parents, Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds. Possibly because those people were of a younger age, 17, 19 or so, and advised to stay away from the public limelight, to not get attacked themselves. The parents of Dylan Rounds didn't want anyone else getting hurt, harmed, interrogated like that, especially if they're a younger age. They shouldn't have to go through that. So the advice was just keep quiet, stay out of it, keep low. Not because of being suspicious or responsible, but just to avoid all that damage and collateral damage and drama and conflict like what the Candice Cooley Justin Rounds were put through by some online, and grudges as well, witch hunts. Does that apply within the Noah Presgrove case? Let me know your thoughts. So that's where I'm at right now. It might sound a little bit unstable how I word things, but it's not for definite that the fishing trip actually did happen and take place. How it's worded though from the girlfriend CC Carter Combs, she didn't end up going in the end, because how it said, I was supposed to. When you say you were supposed to, you're kind of reflecting back on saying the original plan was I was going to go with them, but the plan changed. But how different did the plan change? Was it just simply called off, or did one less person go? Makes you think. And how long were they there for? And what place would they have gone to do fishing? Is there any need to do a map analysis of it? If anyone has the location or the estimated expected location of where Jack Newton, Caleb Newton and the grandfather would go fishing, let me know. If you got coordinates, let me know in the comment section down below. Because like I was saying, if there was a bit of foul play or suspicion going on, if there were murder weapons and items used possibly, could they have been disposed of elsewhere, in a pond, in some water, in a river, buried in the ground? Does any of that or any other evidence link to this fishing trip? Maybe this ties back to the Dylan Rounds case in terms of the theory that when Dylan Rounds died and murdered on the 28th of May 2022, the following day, the 29th, the killer James Brenner and his friend Don Hatley, the rumour was, I said it wasn't proven as a fact, but the rumour was they went on a fishing expedition. The location name wasn't given, but there was a couple of potential places around nearby. Could the fishing trip have been a diversion? Maybe going in that location, in that direction, but for other reasons. Not to directly do fishing, but to actually dispose of items, to bury items, to get rid of them, maybe the murder weapon, maybe clothing, whatever, DNA, disposing of it. Okay? That was a theory. It was never turned into a fact, unfortunately. But it's that possibility. Does it translate well to this case of Noah Presgrove? Did Jack Newton, did Caleb Newton, the grandfather, go fishing but for other reasons? Besides getting their story straight, were they in the process of disposing any evidence or DNA which could link them to the death of Noah Presgrove? Is it worth searching any ponds, lakes nearby where things could have been dumped into it? I said there was that lack of evidence, there was that lack of blood where Noah was found. So could there be any exceptions of items which have been taken away from the place, tampered with, moved on, disposed of, buried, right? Does it link in with this fishing trip? They're my thoughts there. So you've got normal reasons psychologically, as a form of a distraction, escapism, to go fishing and be around people you love, who you get on well with and feel comfortable with at a time of a sad moment. There's that. But then you've got the suspicious element of psychologically Detaching yourself from the area so maybe you can lay low and not be questioned as much and get your story straight in the background, and with the addition of possibly disposing of evidence along the way. Possibilities, because when you look at it quick without thinking too hard, a bad event has happened. Someone you know, you like, and maybe love, but not in that way, has died, passed away, bad enough. But to that extent, the brutality of it, even worse. You want answers. You should care about the person. You want to stay put to hear the latest news. You don't want to be distancing yourself far away as possible most of the time. But if that's what did happen, or that was the initial plan regardless, was other things in Jack Newton's mind at the time? Was there any influence negatively from the father Caleb or the grandfather? Or was it just a normal, natural day out with family, and that was all? Let me know your thoughts down below, right? It might seem a bit limited right now, but I'm just dealing with limited information and context. I don't want to go all in just yet. But they're my thoughts at this moment in time. It could change with time. It could be debunked. It could be reinforced, but we'll see. Wait and see. Let me know your thoughts down below. Whether you agree, disagree, whether you got any additional information, or if you need to correct any misinformation, you're welcome to do so. I appreciate people watching and new people that have come along since to answer questions and clear things up. That does help a lot, and it's very efficient and quick. Now, I will probably have another video coming out later, so be on the lookout for it. In the meantime, feel free to catch up on my previous video that I did yesterday. Click on the I symbol and you will find it. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you later.